right. Thank you. Thanks. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to introduce this keynote session this morning, and we have an amazing speaker who's going to guide us through a conversation that I know is highly relevant to all of us. I want to underscore the title of the keynote. The future of your association is in your learning strategy. I think many of us in the room have digital strategies, we have social media strategies, we have advocacy strategies. I'm not sure how many of us have a learning strategy. I think by the end of the day, we'll all be thinking about that quite differently. So I'm happy to introduce our speaker this morning, Dr. Britt Andreatta, or I think in some circles, Andreatta. She is a seasoned professional with many years of experience with a unique background in leadership, psychology, education, and human sciences. Britt is a former chief learning officer for lynda.com. Many of us familiar with that platform. She is now the CEO of her own company, Seventh Mind. Britt is well published on a number of areas that I think are highly relevant to all of us in the work that we do and activities of our organizations. So some of her publications include The Neuroscience of Learning, Leading Change, Having Difficult Conversations, and Leading with Emotional Intelligence. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Britt Andreatta.
Okay, I think we all should just have one of those that goes with us wherever we go, and we can just walk into a room and be introduced with something fun like that. Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to talk to you today. How many of you were in my session on the neuroscience of learning last year? A handful of you. Okay, so I'm not going to dive into the neuroscience of learning this time, but we'll share with you a link where you can see that talk if it still interests you. But Dawn gave me a particular challenge today, which was to really talk to you about what's happening in the space of learning. Because it is moving so fast and it has changed so much that if you're not running to catch up now, it's going to get harder and harder to catch up. So what we're going to talk about this morning is really the shifting landscape and what's that creating in the learning space, how to measure learning, and I'm going to do a lot of show and tell with some new tools that I think you might find useful that you could weave into your strategy. And we're even at the end going to look into the crystal ball and kind of look at what's coming 10 years from now. I'm so excited that Tim really gave us a great orientation yesterday to the Internet of Things and the Internet of People, because I can't underscore enough how much technology is changing everything about how we approach our work. And this is in all sectors. It affects all of us. So let me give you a few highlights here. The talent industry itself is in major evolution and revolution. If any of you are on the learning or the HR side of the house, there's just major upheaval happening, both philosophically about what it really means to serve talent and attract and retain top talent, as well as how we help people learn and grow professionally. And obviously in all of your fields, professional associations is a major way in which people accelerate their careers and stay on the front edge of their field. And so while they're a member of your association, they may also be working somewhere else where someone else is competing for their attention and for their learning time. So we know that technology has been just accelerating. I love to show this chart because we can really see that particularly in the last 20 years, not only is technology being invented so much faster, but the time that it's adopted by 25% of the US population is halving each time something new rolls out. So we're getting such a fast acceleration. And so I want to hone in on this particular little window here. The advent of the personal computer disrupted so many things. It changed entire industries. It started the gig economy. And because now people had computers in their home that they wanted to use, it opened up a whole new realm of training that didn't exist before. This is actually how Linda Weinman of lynda.com got started. She saw the manuals for software and realized that they were horrible and realized that there was another way to help people learn computers, right? That was her start. We also know that the internet changed everything, right? It changed everything in terms of how we access information, how we connect to our business. And in addition, the biggest thing the web did is it removed gatekeeping from learning. Before that, you had to get admitted to a school or become a member of an association or be tapped for your company's management and training program. Now, if you have a device that lets you on the internet, you can learn from experts around the world. and you can choose your own learning paths, whatever that looks like for you. And finally, the smartphone, put it in your pocket. You can do it anywhere at any time. Some other things on our timeline that are relevant is millennials entered the workforce in 2005. Digital natives, they expect digital access 24/7. E-learning really took off in 2010. That's when we started to see a huge explosion in the marketplace where there was accessibility all the time. And Gallup's engagement report came out in 2013, which really changed the game in the HR L&D side of the house because it talks about employee engagement is really where the profit and the productivity live for any organization. And one of the drivers of engagement is access to opportunities to learn and grow. So it has now made every organization chasing engagement oftentimes through their learning strategy. All of these slides are going to be made available to you, so don't feel like you have to snap every single one of them, although I love the fact that you are. In fact, you're doing it right now. We are using digital technology to learn. But you will have the whole deck available to you. So what's happened is that technology is driving and pushing at an accelerated rate some evolutions and revolutions. The first one is we have shifted from being a culture that focuses on education, then we went to training, and now we're firmly planted in learning. And the difference here is that education was always created to socialize a workforce. You know, we really took people, children, and socialized them to be good at following instructions and having a certain core knowledge so that they could be good workers. It used to be the ticket to the middle class, and recently it has left people with crushing debt and not necessarily access to those opportunities that they were promised. So we're seeing a lot of people leaving the idea that getting a college degree is necessarily the path to success. Then we moved into training, which was really about focusing on adult learning and helping people learn professional skills, focusing on improving performance. How do we make people better in their jobs? And certainly developing leaders. Can we develop leaders? Why, yes, we can. And now everyone has a leadership development program. And where we are now is learning, is really this idea that learning happens all the time, anytime, anywhere, lifelong learning. And it's really a shift in philosophy. And what we're really looking at is developing people's potential, their innate potential that they have, potential that has yet to be tapped, and really starting to look at that as a holistic process, not an event you sign up for and go to. Another revolution that's happening is how we think about people, particularly working adults. We used to think of them as human resources, right? A resource to be used for the benefit of the company. And then we changed that nomenclature to worker and employee, and now we're talking about talent. And the shift here is, human resource was really hire and fire. Worker, we went into unions, workers' rights, started to care about employee satisfaction, we started to care about diversity. But where we are now with talent, certainly we're thinking about the millennials this way, but really it's an issue when you're competing for highly skilled talent, right? And even that word, talent, we have talent that has come in the door. We're going after talent. We want to keep our talent. This is where the conversation of engagement has been driven from. And it's also the shift to talking about inclusion rather than diversity. That's another big revolution that's happening right now. And certainly the rise of purpose, that people want to show up at work and do meaningful work, work that matters, work that gives them a sense of purpose. So this is now the conversation that's really driving how we think about helping people be professionally successful. And then finally, we've had a shift from management science to social science to neuroscience. Management science was really the days of Peter Drucker, very transactional, management by objectives, KPIs, got to hit those targets, really predict and perform. Then we moved into social science where we looked at transformational leadership and how you transform an organization. And this was really some of the work of like Kouzes and Posner, Hershey and Blanchard, Dan Goleman. And now we're into neuroscience, really understanding the biology of what helps people succeed, the biology of how we help people learn and grow. And so some of the things here is neuroplasticity, the fact that our brains can change all the way up until the moment of death, right? You can learn something new at any moment. How we develop habits. It's not just about learning content, it's about shifting behavior, developing the right habits, and certainly the growth mindset, the idea that I might not be good at something yet, but I can get better, and all I need is access to the right opportunities. Key leaders here are Carol Dweck, Charles Duhigg, David Rock, and Richard Davidson. This is the space I live in, is really the translation of neuroscience into workplace challenges, so my two books are on that kind of stuff. So as I was getting ready for this talk, I interviewed a few of you, and I said, so what's happening? What's going on in your organization? And some of the things that I heard from some of you were, wow, members are really starting to meet their learning needs elsewhere. We're not necessarily the go-to place anymore, or they're adding on to what we're offering. It's hard to produce content fast enough. By the time we get our journals out, and by the time we get our classes out, somebody else has already done it. There's already other sources that can do it faster and better. We're seeing a decrease in print and ad revenue as a result. In addition, the traditional conference model is not as effective. People aren't necessarily wanting to take time away and come and spend a few days learning when they can do it at their desk really easily. And we're also seeing some membership dropping in some of your organizations. So if any of you have seen me talk before, you know I practice what I preach. The hippocampus cannot retain information for more than 15 minutes of content before it needs a processing activity. So I'm going to give you a processing activity. Get into pairs or trios, so if you need to scoot over to snuggle up to someone, please do that. But what I want to do is this is a timer, it's going to count down. I want you to have a little discussion with your partner about what are some of the impacts that you're seeing in your organization, what are some of the challenges that you're facing. I want you to talk about real stuff because the rest of our talk is going to give you some tools to solve some of those challenges. So, putting the timer on the clock, it'll ding when we're done. wrapping up. Start wrapping up. And it's going to ding in 3, 2, 1. All right, let's come back together. So keep some of those challenges in mind as we continue our tour of what's happening in learning and how to maybe shift your learning strategy. I want to do a double click now into learning and what's happening within the learning space. So if you haven't been paying attention, which I know you all have, you know that there's an explosion of options now. In fact, I can't keep up on it. Every time I go to a conference, even when they're just 2 months apart, there's new vendors that are showing up, that are doing new things. Highly disruptive space, highly competitive space. So I think this is what Dawn was referring to about the sharks are circling, right? There's lots of people going after learning now. And how does that affect you? Where do you place yourselves? Burson and Associates by Deloitte have done some really great reports on what's happening in the learning space. If you're not yet looking at some of their research, I encourage you to do that. But we know that technology is pushing all kinds of new ways to think about content delivery, content creation, content consumption, how and where people learn, right? And so this is driving all organizations to be rethinking their learning strategy. That's actually the work I do, is I work with a lot of organizations on refining their learning strategy. We also know that this creates new methods, right? Gone are the days of the in-person classroom where you put butts in seats and you talked at them for a certain period of time. Micro-learning, all kinds of opportunities to drive learning moments and learning experiences that are much more flexible, particularly when we know that most working adults do their best learning on the job, right? When I'm building a PowerPoint presentation, for example, and I'm stuck on something, I want the answer now, not to be able to go to a catalog and sign up for a course that's 4 weeks from now that I have to sit through 3 hours to get the answer I need today, right? And so that on-demand learning, that need to be able to solve your challenges while you're having them. What we know is that decision makers are in overwhelm. It's kind of hard to sort through all the choices and to know what to incorporate. So you may feel that way, and yet it's vitally important that you don't put your head on your desk and just kind of ignore the noise, but actually dig in and have someone in your organization that's really staying on top of what's available so that you're not getting too far behind the curve. What we know for sure is that lifelong learning is the new norm. Here's some really interesting statistics. This first one makes me tired. The average length of professional life is now 60 to 70 years. 60 to 70 years, right? Where are you in that timeline? We know that the half-life for most skills these days is 5 years. That when you learn something, hopefully that's not true for the orthopedic surgeons in the room. We want you to, But you guys are in the space where a lot of your learning is something that once you gain it, you continue to hone it. But a lot of skills, particularly around technology-driven skills, they are expiring very quickly. And most people now are in jobs 3 to 4.5 years. Millennials are driving this very short job tenure that's making it really hard on the HR side of the house to attract and retain great talent. We also know that when we talk to workers about learning, they say that they're spending 40% of their time at work learning, right? That they're learning every day. Something is happening every day. But what's really interesting is that 80% of them claim that that learning is occurring outside of the formal learning opportunities provided to them, the ones by their organization. So again, they're getting it everywhere, and that means that there's competition. LinkedIn recently did a workplace learning report. I can share this with you. It's in the link that we're sending you that has the deck and other stuff. But some interesting statistics here is that we know that where people learn is first of all at the point of need. So that I'm stuck now, I need it right now. So on-demand learning. We know that 47% of workers are learning in the evenings and weekends. 42% are doing it while sitting at their office desk. 30% when alerted to updates, and 27% during their commute, while they're heading into work and back home from work. So learning is happening everywhere. And millennials in particular are very focused on learning. They really care about maximizing their potential. And in fact, a study by Glassdoor has identified that ability to learn and progress is one of the biggest differentiators for millennials when choosing a place to work. They're actually asking questions in interviews about what learning opportunities are there for me. How are you going to help me grow? And 42% say they're going to leave their organization because they're not learning fast enough. So I can't underscore enough this hunger that's there for learning, and I think it's making the industry better, and it also means that we have to really be on our toes. Now, I'm using the word learning a lot. There really is a difference between learning and training, and so I want to identify this for you. If we were to do this visually, I'd make training that little dot at the bottom of the screen, and learning would be that much bigger. And that's not even to scale. If I could blow it out the room, I would, okay? Because what we know is that learning is actually a biological process. We are wired to learn. We learn in every moment of every day. And we've tried to put that in a box by calling it training. But really, there's a shift here to think about these things differently. Training is usually a specific event or activity. And most training is done from the organization's perspective. We need our people to know X, Y, or Z. And it's kind of a one-size-fits-all philosophy. Learning is really this understanding that happens anytime, anywhere, and it's designed from the learner's perspective. What does the learner need? What's going to honor their diversity of background and sophistication so that they can come in at the point that matches them and get what they need and not be forced to sit through something that's too advanced or often too behind what their current skill sets are. Training comes from a philosophy of, we're going to help you develop new skills so you can carry out the specific behavior or task, usually from the org's perspective, where learning is really, we want you to gain this understanding so that you can be creative in the moment and innovate as you need. So it's not just replicate this. We want you to have the why behind it so that you can make it work for many situations. Training is given to, we tell teacher direct. Learning is engaged with, the organization partners with the learner on ways to grow, develop, and adapt. Training oftentimes comes from a compliance perspective in a way. We got to make sure that they know this, particularly in the HR side of the house. There's a CYA element of it. In fact, if you look at how most organizations, particularly corporations, develop, they're in existence before they bring on HR. And when they bring on HR, the first learning that happens is compliance training, usually sexual harassment and fix the managers that are screwing up. And then they add learning around that, right? But it always starts with a CYA component. Learning, the goal is to enhance potential and the performance of the learner in really meaningful ways. And then finally, training can be perceived by the person in the training room as really, irrelevant to them. It might not meet them where they're at. They're going to check out. And if it's not if it's not capturing their attention, they're bored. They're checking out. They're not engaging. Where learning is immediately relevant, immediately helpful. And people go back to those learning sources again and again and again. We see this with lynda.com and LinkedIn Learning, is that people find it really relevant and they come back over and over. So what does it mean to measure learning? Well, I know we're all familiar with this. This is kind of the old way. Attendance. Did people show up? Were there butts in seats? What are the completion rates? How many hours did people put in? This is really kind of the old standard now. The new standard is really brain-based and looking at what happens in the brain that really drives real learning. I'm not going to go into the details here. If you want to get some of the specifics, you can pick up my first book, Wired to Grow. But what we know is that transformative learning kind of happens on 3 levels. The first is psychological. Someone has a change in their understanding. And there's different ways we can get at this. Knowledge, information, giving people models and theories gives people the why. And we certainly gain that through experience too. The second form is convictional, change in belief system, right? I'm now seeing this in a whole different way. I've had a belief level shift. What we get here are epiphanies, aha moments, and flashes of insight. And what now a lot of learners, and this is kind of the message I give a lot of L&D folks, is our goal is to design moments of insight, not tell. Design moments of insight, because actually neurologically, when someone has a moment of insight, it's nearly unforgettable. There's stuff that happens in the brain. It's like taking the pill, the blue pill in the Matrix. And once Neo did that, he couldn't see the world the old way. That's what insight does for us. And then finally, there's behavioral, which is where we change our actions. And this is ultimately what we're after, right? Most of the time when we put together a learning event, we're trying to shift someone's behavior. So a lot of the research here is on really what happens when we develop a habit neurologically, how do we help people develop the right habits, and how do we get them enough practice time that they can get better at that. A lot of our learning says, here's some stuff to learn, and we don't make sure that the practice and the behavior change comes as part of that learning experience. And then certainly we're thinking about how do we get to mastery, particularly in your world, right? For your members, getting them to levels of mastery matter. And so we know competency is now the thing we want to look at. What if someone is particularly brilliant and picks up things really quickly? They might get to levels of mastery faster than somebody else. Is your learning strategy flexible enough to pace with people individually? And if they don't, if novice level is fine, great. Put novice amount of dollars toward your novice path, right? And make sure that you've got your dollars in your strategy building out the mastery paths when and where you need them. One of the things I do with organizations is have them analyze who needs what level of mastery when. And then we make sure that the learning paths and the learning strategy actually map to that. Because what we find is that they've put dollars in the wrong places and where they're not getting people to the right skill level when they need them to. All right, so I just gave you a bunch of stuff. I want you to just take, again, 5 minutes with your partner. How are you currently measuring and tracking learning? What do you think about that? Psychological, convictional, behavioral? Are you kind of tending to those 3 levels? I want you to just kind of noodle on what your current learning looks like, your current learning strategy, and see if there's anything in there that you want to pick up on. wrapping up. Start wrapping up. It's going to ding in 3, 2, 1. Toast is ready. No. All right, so one of the things I want to do now is kind of go into a show and tell portion of some tools that I find really interesting and intriguing, and these are all tools you could bring into the learning strategy you already have in place, and they would really help, regardless of your industry. So a couple things I want to highlight first is, first of all, badges, right? If you're not thinking about badges, this is really starting to come up because people are learning in so many places that folks want to track that learning. They want it to be showable to others. They want to start to have a visible resume of their learning. All kinds of organizations are doing this. We're going to see it more and more. So I want to give you this one little video which kind of explains what badges are and a tool that you might find useful. Oops, hang on. The little arrow that I can hit is so small on my screen. There we go.
Learning today happens anywhere and everywhere. It happens in the classroom, on the job, in the community, and online. We can no longer think of learning in one way. Today's social and economic challenges require learning that engages students, keeps pace with technological change, teaches 21st century skills, and provides meaningful assessments of our learning. How do we recognize and value the way we learn today? What if we used badges? What is a badge? A badge is an online representation of a skill or achievement you've earned. They've been used in gaming and online spaces to motivate behavior, recognize achievement, and establish credibility. What if we used badges for learning? Badges could be created and issued by anyone: schools, online spaces, cultural and civic institutions, community and professional organizations, to represent a limitless set of skills, achievements, and knowledge. Badges could be earned by anyone completing programs or projects or demonstrating specific knowledge, skills, and abilities. Badges could be shared on websites or blogs, social media profiles, online portfolios, and resumes, leading to real opportunities like connecting with potential collaborators, earning school credit, or getting a job. But in order to give badges wide credibility and acceptance, a robust badge ecosystem needs to be developed. Much work has already been done in critical areas. Mozilla's Open Badges infrastructure provides the software and open technical standard for everyone to earn, issue, and display badges across various contexts. A growing community of badge experts has developed various models of badge systems for anyone to use and adapt. Significant research has been done to provide a base of evidence about the potential of badges. A campaign is underway enlisting employers, colleges and universities, urban school districts, and after-school programs to expand demand for and supply of badging opportunities. The promise is to ensure that badges give everyone recognition for the learning that happens anywhere and lets them share it in the places that matter.
Another thing that's shifting is the decline of the LMS, because it's been too rigid and not flexible enough to really reflect all the different ways people learn. Even organizations can't stuff all the offerings they have into an LMS. So we're seeing the rise of what's called an XMS, an experience management system. One of the front runners is Degreed. If you haven't looked at it yet, I would encourage you to give it a look. It sits on top of anything you're already offering and creates a cohesive landscape so that your learners can track and measure everything, and they create a portfolio that goes with them into any other setting. So it's really about a lifelong learning platform that individual members can sign up for, but organizations can have it as a way to contain and host and track any kind of learning that that organization offers, including associations. Another thing that we're seeing rise is gamification. If you're not yet playing with it, pun intended, you should be checking out gamification. What we know about gamification is that it makes learning more fun. So you can take learning, and you can certainly have people go through a regular training or learning event, but if you gamify it, what we see is it increases engagement, people will play with it longer, retention goes up, they tend to take in that learning and keep it longer, and in addition, they will persist through challenges in a gaming environment in ways that they give up in a regular training event. So there's something about it that kind of biologically hits some good stuff. Carl Kapp is one of the thought leaders in this space, and I'm going to play a little demo from his course that's on lynda.com about gamifying, but he also has a couple great books.
Being marketers at their core, ExactTarget
This is an example
has always
from a
believed
company.
in the power of relevant and targeted marketing communications. ExactTarget implemented a gamified solution because they were introducing a new product, Mobile Connect, and wanted to bring the sales force up to speed on the features and functionality of the product. The learners log into the gamification platform via the internet. The entire solution is hosted in the cloud. When learners enter the gamification platform for the first time, they get a narrative that explains how it works. This is using the story element of gamification. The player must ascend a mountain for each topic. The game consists of 3 paths up the mountain to deliver a scroll of wisdom to the guru. 3 paths, a different scroll each time. The game's mountains are the instructional topics to cover. Each mountain has learning objectives associated with it. Learners must answer questions about product knowledge. If players answer correctly, their score goes up. If they answer incorrectly, their score goes down, as shown in this example. The immediate benefit of this gamified solution over a traditional training tool is its allure. People wanted to play the knowledge guru. They didn't always want to attend a training session.
He goes on to share some of the other results that that company found was that not only did the retention of the learning was much higher, the teams were ready faster to sell that product, so that they saw an acceleration in that customer service and sales team's ability to get out and do the job and sell the new product. So it had real ROI on it in terms of how quickly that team could do that. We are already playing with gamification, right? How many of you count your steps? Okay, and you earn your Starbucks points for every coffee you buy, right? And eventually those points are worth something. So we're gamifying stuff already, but it's a way to use it as a learning tool. And there are people who are really great at gamifying learning design, so make sure that you work with someone who's got that background. Another tool that I love to introduce folks to is practice. And practice is actually a learning methodology. It's a patented learning methodology that hits on how we help people develop behaviors and habits. And it goes with an online platform, so it's really easy to use and it can be used on any mobile device. How it works is the first step is people are given a challenge of a skill to do, and then they practice it. And then they move into peer interaction where they get feedback from their peers. Then the third step is they see someone doing it right, an expert doing it right, and they reflect on how theirs compares to the experts. And then in addition, they get additional coaching and mentoring. All of this can happen on a mobile device as well as a desktop device. So I'm going to give you an example from Comcast. This is going to be some screenshots of kind of the challenge that the technicians that show up at people's houses to install products, this is part of training that they were going through. So here's a sample.
Greetings, everyone. For our next activity, we're going to see how you would handle a potentially difficult customer situation. So here's the scenario. You go out to a customer's residence to install 3 X1 boxes. The problem is, when you get there, you realize it's an apartment and they only have 1 active outlet. How would you address that with the customer? Please remember, record your response as if you were speaking directly to that customer. Thank you.
Hello, Mrs. Jones. Hi, I'm BJ with Comcast. I understand we're here to install 3 of our X1 products for you today. I see that we're having a slight issue because only 1 outlet in your apartment is active. We need to contact
Another option is you could split the line and run a cable around to the next room yourself in order to have signal there if you're comfortable doing that. Now, we can't actually run lines on the ground for safety reasons, but I can go over a few things about running lines yourself if that's the route you want to take.
So the interface is whatever the challenge is, you can show people what the challenge is and give them instructions. And then what we're finding is that they make a video of themselves doing that thing. And what we're seeing is that people upload 3 and 4 versions of the video because they want to get it right. So what we're doing is enabling practice. Then that video, once they upload, can be opened to their peer community to give them feedback on it. They can watch other people's, give them feedback on theirs. And then they have the opportunity, and so you can see how they can give each other feedback on how they're doing. And then in addition, they can then see a model response, an expert doing it correctly, and then reflect on how did theirs compare to the experts, and write some self-reflection. And then finally, all of this can have an online coaching element where the expert or other people in the organization can give them feedback. So creating some real vibrant ways to provide coaching and mentoring. What we know is that it actually drives performance change, as well as people having stronger senses of their competence and confidence, so that they're feeling more comfortable with their skill set after going through this process. Okay, another tool is Immersion. They actually have a booth here, so if you want to deeper dive into this product, I encourage you to visit them. Immersion uses avatars to create a virtual simulation. But what's different about these avatars, instead of them being canned and pre-recorded, they're actually animated by live actors. So you get that kind of unexpected stuff that happens with real humans when they interact. But you can design any kind of environment, whether it's a boardroom, a surgery center, or whatever, hotel front desk, so that employees get the opportunity to practice, or members can have the ability to practice. So it really creates the brain science of it. People are getting the real neural pathway of doing it in real time and having to respond to those unexpected challenges. And what I love is that the avatars, there's so many different combinations. So you can really create whatever environment and diversity that you need to make it realistic for whatever your members or your learners are going through. So here's an example of the product.
Immersion is the interactive virtual reality environment where professionals practice and master the complex interpersonal skills necessary to be effective in high-stakes professions. To deliver this compelling experience, our technology leverages a combination of artificial intelligence and live actors to deliver powerful simulations in which learners become fully immersed in the virtual world. Considered the gold standard in training, simulations inoculate learners for on-the-job stress by simultaneously engaging a learner's emotional and cognitive processes. This approach creates the neural pathways necessary to turn new skills into daily routines. What follows are just a few examples of how this groundbreaking technology is being leveraged to provide a space for learners to practice, receive feedback, and hardwire hard-to-teach interpersonal skills.
So the first thing I want to ask you to think about is your approach in that situation. I understand being upset when you've got a client with a need and you want to get that resolved. That's number one priority. That's what we're here for.
Okay, but can I just point out, I think this is kind of sexist, frankly. I have the same leadership style as Jack over in advertising, and no one is talking to him about changing his leadership style, which I think is part of what you're going to be doing here.
Well, first off, Jack doesn't work in this section, so I really don't want to talk about Jack's performance. That's not germane. And I would have this conversation with anybody, Stacy. This is really critical.
You have some concerns about Beeline and our capacity to deliver, and I want to hear a little bit more.
Certainly, Grant. So one thing I'm very concerned with is that you are such a young company. We run on a tight budget here. I care about money, time, and everything moving quickly. I need assurances that your company has delivered on this type of scale before, and that your approach will not be overly cumbersome on the staff. What do you have to say?
If it's really cold in your room, that sounds awful, 50 degrees. So I'm going to send up some blankets and a little heater for your room.
More importantly than this, in my opinion, if I'm paying good money for a room that has some sort of temperature control, don't you think I should get it?
Learn more about how Immersion is revolutionizing professional learning at www.immersion.com.
What's great about Immersion is that you can make it whatever your company needs or your members need. So for example, one of the large hotel chains did that, and they had all these lobbies, And then they had a series of very difficult clients come up, and they could make them as outrageous as they needed to be, swearing, yelling, so that employees could have real in-body experiences of how to handle that, right, in a safe environment. And then the whole thing is recorded so that later someone could watch that and give them coaching. And then they can run it again. They can run it as many times as they need until they feel comfortable in that kind of situation. So they really have a lot of opportunities there. And in addition, you can purchase it for individual kind of simulations. You can also license the technology for something that you're doing within your organization. So make sure you talk to them because they're here today. And then Silver Thread, we got to talk about virtual reality. It's been around for a long time, but it's finally starting to really become a force within the learning space because we're finally getting the technology to be more mobile, and also we're finding some really useful applications of it. But the one that I really like is what Silver Thread is doing because they are really making it an in-body experience. Now, the neuroscience of this is really fascinating because what they're doing is, in addition to having the VR camera, which captures the 360, is that they also look down so that you see the body of the expert that you're inhabiting. And so you get to be in body of an expert doing a task. And what we're knowing is that that really is creating a real memory for the brain to see what it's like to do it from an expert's point of view. So what we have here is this in-body point of view. You can do it, it's a 3D 360 view that they get, it's most realistic. That body ownership illusion is really important, and you can actually change out, they're getting to the point where you could have it be a female body or a different person of color or whatever you need in terms of what would be appropriate. They're doing one right now with the military where they're taking a situation where soldiers are in a village, and they're having someone walk through this scenario, this kind of tense situation from the soldier's perspective, and then you go back through the situation from one of the villagers' perspective, right? And you see the thing from a different point of view. And so the opportunities here for developing EQ are really amazing. And in addition, you can also put people in realistic situations like working on an oil platform, for example, and have an in-body experience of what it's like to be among fast-moving equipment in a dangerous situation, but being protected in a safe environment while you're doing that learning. I'm going to show you their demo. They've got an upbeat dance music, so feel free to get up and dance if you want to. But what you'll see here is the gentleman in the plaid shirt is actually seeing it. So when he looks left or right, the visual follows him. And then he's going through a couple trainings where he's learning something from an expert's perspective. Without them actually doing it themselves until they get the opportunity to do it themselves. But the brain is making a body memory while they do this.
To do that, we're going to make sure we maintain a head, tail, chin look and measure the airway from the corner of the mouth to the angle of the jaw. Once we have gotten the appropriate size, we're going to go ahead and invert that to the upside down position, rotating it into the airway, and inserting it so that the frontal resting place is just above.
Congratulations, welcome to our company. This is the paperwork that we're paid to fill out to get you on board, and our team is very excited to meet you.
Hello, I'm Steven, the CEO. I know you have a lot of paperwork to do, but why don't you follow me and I'll introduce you to some people and show you around.
And some research on virtual reality is that we know that folks that do virtual reality training have six times fewer errors than the people who did it through traditional training. In addition, they complete the procedure faster, so that body memory allows them to get to states of expertise or mastery faster. And in addition, the retention is much higher for an in-body experience than it is for hearing or participating in other forms of training. So if you're not yet checking it out, I encourage you to start exploring it, because for many of the things that your associations help people learn on, it could be a really powerful way. And particularly with now, these VR goggles getting so affordable, it's really becoming something that we can all explore. And then, if we look ahead in the crystal ball to what's coming in the next decade, these things are coming. I've seen prototypes of some of this stuff. So VR is going to become an everyday tool. We can use it for all kinds of things. And when people see that onboarding example, they're like, really? Are we going to onboard people? Well, sometimes that's appropriate. There's one manufacturer right now that's using it because they've got 6 different plants in 6 different countries. And an employee might be asked to go to these different plants, and they can't afford to fly them all to these plants ahead of time. So what they're doing is they're doing a virtual onboarding to each of these locations so that they're ready when they get there. So there's all kinds of cool things we can do with that. Artificial intelligence, it is big projects at big companies. It's coming. We already see some of it in some of the products coming out, but it's going to be driving also learning. And what's interesting is that artificial intelligence is also copying kind of how the human body learns to help robots learn, and some of these technological things about how we learn. Computer-brain interfaces. Yes, there will be a day when we plug in, and we will have chips that read what we're doing and allow an even more wireless interface with the stuff that we're working on. And remember how fast technology is innovating? There's going to be stuff that's created in the next 10 years that we cannot even conceive of now. And my question to you is your learning strategy flexible enough that you can adapt when that happens? Because it's coming. And there's things that we just can't even anticipate with how fast technology shifts. So is it time for a change? Is it time for you to reconsider how you're approaching learning now and start to think about new ways to learn and new ways to be ready for learning? One of the things that I know in organizations that I go into is that resistance to change is strong, right? It's messy. Change is messy. Even when you do it right, it's emotionally messy, it's tactically messy, and some folks kind of put it off as long as they can because that messiness is a little overwhelming. It's why I wrote my recent book, Wired to Resist, The Brain Science of Why Change Fails, because we are biologically wired to resist change. But there's ways that you can move through that, and what you don't want to do is have your resistance to change hobbling the effectiveness of your organization to meet your members' needs. So if change is a little bit of your resistance, totally normal, totally human, but don't let that stand in the way of getting ready for your learning strategy to really meet your learners' needs. So I want to challenge you with a question, which is, are those fins sharks? What if they're helpful friends? Right? What if these technologies are not threats, but they're opportunities for you to leverage that to become really the front edge for what your learners need and how you meet your members' needs where they are? So I want to have you consider that. I also want to leave you with one of my favorite quotes, which is, in times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the others find themselves equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. Right? This is it. We are designed to learn. We hunger to learn. So let's do this thing. We're now going to transition to the panel, and I'm going to leave you with your final discussion as we do the chair thing and all that fun stuff. So as we do that transition, I want you to take 5 more minutes with your partner to talk about, what are some takeaways? What are some aha moments for you? What are some technology you might want to explore or play with as you think about how to meet your learners' needs? Thank you.